Yeah, I mean, I think it's really right-minded to suggest that humanity is continuous with the rest of nature. We're not somehow the only organism that has a soul. I think some of the soul discussion is very odd. Um, I think it could be that animals live in life eternal and only humans know the agony of the non-life eternal because they're too busy thinking about things rather than being in the life eternal. That is, it's like death is a hoax played upon those organisms that can think about things rather than simply be in a life that's eternal. And I think all of that really comes into this discussion that I was trying to suggest, which is that even if we suggest that humans are continuous with the rest of the nature and that we're natural, that we're continuous with the rest of nature and that we're natural in the way that other organisms are, we're the result of millions and millions and billions of years of evolutionary development at various levels of chemistry and biology, and then all kinds of socio-historical developments relating to technologies that have extended consciousness and radically altered our experience in the world. I think part of the issue here is that humans can and do deal with what is not the case. We talk about what isn't the case. We live in the world of fantasy, and because we can say what something is not, the world of humans is infinitely huge. See, part of the way that time is what it is because we can separate past from present from future, but what is it that separates those? Well, it's nothing. I can say that the past is not the present, but where is that gap that somehow makes something become the past and no longer the present? It's funny, von Fritsch, when he was doing his study on bees, I don't know if people know this, a bee, the dance that the bee gives is remarkably complex. There's different dialects to different bees, and the bee comes back and it does this little waggle when it comes back to the hive, and it communicates a great amount of information to the hive, including the food source and what the distance is. And they've even been able to, subsequent research has been able to show that the polarization of the light in the sky can systematically misdirect the bees, and they can have miscommunications. But at no point do they ever discover that a bee goes back to the hive and then, as a practical joke, waggles where the food isn't. See this now. Granted, Bateson's work does talk about how play does seem to appear in mammalian communication. Higher mammals do have this framing capacity to play, which is this nascent state of saying something isn't, right? I mean, Bateson was at the Fleshhacker Zoo and he saw a monkey nipping at another monkey, and he saw that for that monkey, that nip meant the bite but didn't mean what a bite would mean. Right, it's sort of like the equivalent of a staged kiss, right, where the kiss means a kiss, but it doesn't mean what a kiss would mean, right? But humans live in the world that's partly not the case, right? Look at how much money is spent in entertainment, and for people to speak of fictions, and for people to, not only is there a huge amount of money spent on fiction writing and novels, but all the money spent on these imaginative films that people watch, telling it like it isn't. And even those stories that are supposedly biographies, so much of it is filled with detail that is embellishment, which really is what it wasn't. Now, it's something, but the human world, again, deals with what's not, right? If I have this blue pen over here, and here I have a cap. Now, if I say, what is the difference between them? How is this pen not this cap? I think to a human, that question makes sense, but other organisms, I think they just simply deal with the being of each. They can see, perhaps, and relate to the qualities of this one and this one, but these sort of odd sense of how one is not the other, right? Try to think about it this way. Ask yourself, does your dog ever suddenly come up to you and bark about the stranger who didn't come yesterday? Right? I mean, it almost doesn't make sense to think of other creatures concerning themselves with possibilities, but possibilities they're the nascent state of what could not be the case. Like, so we talked about entertainment. Okay, so someone might say, well, it's not really, entertainment, that people don't want fantasy. People look at sporting events. Sporting events has lots of, it's facts. We want to look at all the statistics and the accumulation of who are the best athletes, and people pay top dollar for all that. Even if we grant that, look at all the money that gets spent on betting, as betting and gambling relate to professional sports or just sports in general. Gambling as potential playing with what could not be the case is a uniquely human endeavor. Now, it's not to deny that other organisms have levels of prevarication, levels of framing and play. They certainly do, and dogs are a tricky case. They've been bred very carefully for certain characteristics, and they have been domesticated, and they've, the human-dog relation is ancient, right? It's very ancient. If people haven't ever read Lorenz's work, certainly they'd want to. But I think if people would really try to imagine, just for a moment, how much what it is to be human is to dwell in what is not the case. It's to be able to speak of it otherwise, and without the ability to speak of it otherwise, you wouldn't dwell in the world of possibilities. Your dog, right? Your dog can be very smart, and dogs can be very well trained, but when your dog goes out there and accidentally eats a piece of poop thinking it's food, I think we start to say, wow, the dog is dealing with a very different realm. I don't think he goes, food, oh, not food. I think there is some sort of relation to it, but there's always some being. There's never the non-being of it. I mean, you could go around nature all day long and you'd never find a nothing. You'd never find a gap. You'd never find a lack. You'd never find the presence of an is not. But the humans deal with that, right? It's Sartre's example of looking for Pierre in the cafe. Like, I continuously look for Pierre in the cafe, and Pierre's not there. And I continuously make his non-being sort of appear in the cafe. Each person I look at, some person enters into the cafe, and suddenly I look at that person, and then I sort of project the image of Pierre and nillate in the other person, and no, it's not Pierre. But somehow Pierre's non-being is occurring in that room as an objective non-being. That is, Pierre's not there. Well, there's lots of Pierre, lots of places where Pierre is not. But somehow here, objectively, Pierre's not here, right? It is disclosing an objective truth about a situation that I'm in, the non-being there of Pierre. But there's no such thing as a non-being there of Pierre. Pierre's always only wherever he is. It's the same problem with when we look at strictly causal sequences. Causal sequences, oftentimes they get so projected in such a way that we cover over the experience of a genuine possibility. I think there's so many different ways to get at this issue. I do think, though, for Kenneth Burke, I think he's one of the best resources on this, on his definition of the human and how that relates to negativity and what it means to be invented by the negative, right? He'd say that we are the negative, because it's not just the philosophical is not, this kind of beardy bully stuff where we're saying, that we live in the world of being able to say, what this is not. I could talk all day. Because I can say what this is not, I can say an infinity of true statements about it. I can say it's not a well-cooked eggplant, just as an example, right? I can say that this is not 231 kilometers from Egypt. Again, we could just give an infinity of true statements about it. But I think that for Burke, what he would say is, what you don't want to look at is the is not. You want to look at the shall not, right? Humans emerge out of a flurry, a sort of a continuous flow of tribal thou shalt nots. And it's only in the resistance of the tribal thou shalt nots, the don't, that the human emerges, and then after it's emerged, its sense of the negative is strong enough to be able to project the quotes, the is not. But humans deal in the world that isn't, and that's what's so interesting about them. The irony would be a person who would reduce humans to a true account of them, when the most truthful account of humans is that to be human is to deal in fancy, it's to deal in possibilities. That's part of who we are.